for a long time, and I've watched him work the many difficult issues at the national level. He never shies away from the big problems. He faces them head on, and he provides a common sense solution to these issues. And he'll tell you what you need to hear. That's the truth, and I respect him for that. I also respect him for his military service. We have something in common here, both Air Force officers, and Senator Graham retired here just recently with 33 years of service in the United States Air Force. He joined the Air Force, I think, in 1984, spent 6 years in Europe as a JAG officer, and then 6 years as a member of the McIntyre Air National Guard in South Carolina, and he finished his career in the reserves, in the Air Force Reserve, and retired with 33 years as a colonel and a JAG officer and instructor. So, Senator Graham, we take this opportunity to thank you for your extraordinary service to your country, and we appreciate all that you've done. We really do. I will say that he's still serving. The senator's still serving. In 1994, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, and he was the first Republican from the 3rd District to be elected since 1877. Now, he's not that old, but he just had a birthday.
I didn't know the guy. I didn't know the strong to that up.
And he was, I'm not from South Carolina, but I know that's a very significant event. And he was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2002, re-elected in 2008 and 2014, and he was and still is the top vote getter in South Carolina history with the 2008 re-election. And so I'm kind of getting the idea that South Carolinians really like their senator. Senator Graham is a member of the Armed Services Committee, and he chairs the subcommittee on personnel issues for the Armed Services Committee. He believes in security through strength, and he's a strong proponent of a strong military. And he's a well-respected leader and advocate for solving the big problems facing our country today. And I think you will see after the discussion today the Senator's in-depth knowledge of foreign policy and the understanding of the dynamics of the Middle East. They're exceptional, and they're the best that I have seen. So Senator Graham, welcome back to Iowa, and welcome to Cedar Rapids.
Thank you very much. What a nice introduction. Thank you all very, very much. I love round tables where the table's square. But all I can say is I'm honored to be introduced by such a good man. Matt, thank you. There's an association for everything in America. If you can fry it or grow it, there's an association for it. There's a lobbying group for almost every part of our economy. What I like most about what you've done here, Matt, and all of you who are on the board, you've created a voice regarding who should be the next commander-in-chief. I think that's just as important as ethanol. And I'm for ethanol, by the way. The bottom line is this organization is going to focus in 2016 on the candidates who want to be commander-in-chief. And we should take that selection as seriously as any other area of being president. I would argue that the most important job of President of the United States, above all else, is to be Commander-in-Chief of the finest fighting force, protect them, guide them, equip them, train them, have their back, put them in situations where they can win. And I think I can do that. I think after 8 years, soon to be 8 years of Barack Obama, the job of Commander-in-Chief is the most important job that the President in 2017 will have to deal with. The Obama administration is dangerously naive when it comes to the Mideast, and have shown a level of incompetency that surpasses Jimmy Carter. There are 16 Republicans, all good, but none better than Lindsey Graham when it comes to being Commander-in-Chief, protecting you, your family, our way of life against radical Islam. Here's my philosophy, here's my policy. When it comes to radical Islam, protecting your family, your friends, our way of life, whatever it takes, as long as it takes. I hope I'm clear. Whatever it takes, as long as it takes. There will be no peace through strength with radical Islam. Our beloved Ronald Reagan had a doctrine of peace through strength. By challenging the Soviet Union and other bad actors, we would have peace, making it certain that they could not challenge American men. The best way to prevent war is to deter it. Have a strong military that no rational person would take on. Ronald Reagan proved that after Jimmy Carter, you could do that. He, the Pope, and Margaret Thatcher were strong moral voices, saying on the other side of the Berlin Wall is an evil empire, at the same time working with that evil empire. Evil abounds, always has and always will. The question is, what will get people do? I can tell you one thing for sure. For America to be secure, we must lead. Without a strong America, you have an unsecured, dangerous world. It is in our national security interest to lead this world, not be run over by it. So, I say security through strength. You will never have peace with radical Islam. Does that make sense to you? I'm not trying to achieve peace with radical Islam. I'm trying to achieve their destruction, because nothing else will work. On September the 11th, 2001, our nation was attacked. That attack originated from a safe haven granted bin Laden and al-Qaeda by the Taliban in Afghanistan. To those who don't understand this is a religious war, you're making a huge mistake. It is a religious war. The Nazis wanted a master race. These people want a master religion. To those who believe we brought this war on ourselves by meddling in the Mideast, you don't understand who we're dealing with. In Afghanistan, we did not have one soldier in 2001. We didn't have an embassy. We did not provide the Taliban one penny of aid, and we got attacked anyway. We left them alone, and what did it get us? 3,000 dead Americans. My fear is that the next time we get attacked, you'll add a lot of zeros, simply because radical Islam is becoming more powerful and somebody needs to put them in a box. The only reason 3,000 died on 9/11 is they could not get the weapons to kill 3 million of us. If they could, they would. So here's what I would do as Commander-in-Chief. I would rebuild our military. If you don't have the capability to do everything I'm about to describe to you. We're going to have the smallest Navy since 1915, the smallest Army since 1940, and half of the operational squadrons in the Air Force will not be combat ready because the Congress, not some foreign power, has created budget cuts under sequestration to give us the smallest military in modern time to the time we need it the most. No force could shoot down the Air Force better than the Congress. No enemy could deplete the Army like the Congress. I've opposed sequestration from day one because I thought it was short-sighted and naive. By 2021, we're going to spend 2.3% of GDP on defense. The historical average has been 5%. How do you deal with threats from China, Russia, and radical Islam without the capability? Here's the underpinning of my foreign policy. Superior capability over all adversaries, nation, state, and terrorists. Overwhelming capacity so you can deal with China and the Mideast at the same time. And a determined will to protect this nation and stand by our friends. So here's what awaits us as a nation. We either deal with radical Islam now or pay a bigger price later. The mistake to withdraw from Iraq against sound military advice by President Obama haunts us to this day. I predicted in 2011 if we did not leave a residual force of at least 10,000, the Mideast and Iraq would go to hell, and unfortunately I was right. President Bush made his fair share of mistakes. General Shinseki was right. We needed about 200,000 people after the fall of Saddam. I made mistakes. Taking the Iraqi army down was a mistake. I have learned from my mistakes, Obama's and Bush's. Unlike President Obama, President Bush changed strategy when advised to do so. The surge did work. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan 35 times. I've seen what works and what doesn't. In 2008, before the surge, Iraq was in complete chaos, no security, no political progress. General Petraeus and others under his command, the surge worked. Security was in a good spot. Every editorial writer, including the New York Times, was talking about the stability we achieved in Iraq and the political progress we're making. Every military leader told President Obama it's tenuous. These people have been under hell for years, and we can't leave until the job is finished. The decision to withdraw the 10,000 set in motion the rise of ISIL, which the predecessor was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was on its knees, and people from Iowa brought them on their knees. To the Iowa National Guard, who's deployed multiple times, God bless you. To those who fought in Iraq, it breaks my heart to tell you that we're going to have to go back, but we are. The soldier did their job, the politicians screwed this up. And it's going to take a commander-in-chief with a vision to reset the world, and I am that person. As to Iraq, General Keane, the architect of the surge, says without any hesitation that we have too little in terms of troop presence to change the dynamic in Iraq. It does matter what happens in Iraq. They're coming here if we do not stop them over there. We need about 10,000 U.S. forces, not 3,500. The additional forces will do the following. Special forces units on the ground morning, noon, and night going after ISIL leadership, putting pressure on their leadership. When they talked on the phone, when they got in the car, they would either die or be captured. Special forward air controllers, we would make sure the pilots could drop bombs on the right targets. 75% of the sorties come back with the bombs on the aircraft. We need trained and advised elements at the battalion level so the Iraqi army will fight and not cut. We need a couple of aviation battalions to make sure that the military advantage we seek will be had over ISIL. There's nothing like a couple of battalions of attack helicopters to change the tide of battle. It breaks my heart that we will have to go back. We are back, we just don't have the right strategy. Under Lindsey Graham, we will have the right strategy. You cannot stabilize Iraq unless you deal with Syria. Syria is hell on earth. Barack Obama's strategy regarding degrading and destroying ISIL will not work. His goal is the right one. He has no strategy in place to achieve that goal. Here's what it takes to destroy the caliphate in Syria. It's going to take a ground component. You cannot do this by the air. As much as I love our Air Force, you're not going to defeat ISIL from the air. Does that make sense? Who goes in on the ground? The people in the region go in on the ground with our help. I would go to Saudi Arabia. I would go to Turkey. I would go to Egypt. I would go to all the regional powers and say, we're going to come together because we have a common faith. We're going to destroy this caliphate because it represents a threat to our homeland and your way of life. You will provide the vast majority of the fighting force, but we will integrate our forces into yours to make sure you have the capability to win a fight none of us can lose. It will be a rather large force because there are 30 or 40,000 at least ISIL fighters inside of Syria, but they're not 10 feet tall. With American integration of air power and ground components doing things that the Arabs can't do, we will pull the caliphate up by its roots and we will hold the ground to allow Syria to heal. It will be hard, it will be expensive, and they will pay for it. They've paid for 2 wars, they're going to pay for the 3rd one. And to do nothing is a choice of its own. To those who are hesitant about destroying the caliphate, here's what awaits us if we do not. More foreign fighters flock to the fight with Western passports to come here. What you saw yesterday is going to continue until we take the allure of ISIL away from all those who could be radicalized by destroying the caliphate and proving they are the losers they actually are. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have a plan for Iraq. I have a plan for Syria. My plan includes some American forces, mostly coming from the region, providing capacity they do not possess, with a determined will to hold the ground, because if you don't, you repeat the same mistakes over and over. To do nothing is a choice. The likelihood of being attacked here at home grows greater, is larger, the more powerful they get in Iraq and Syria. If we do nothing, our best friend in the region, other than Israel, the King of Jordan, is in a very bad spot. Syria is a cancer on the Mideast, and it has to be dealt with, and you will not get one Arab army to go on the ground in Syria unless you deal with Assad. He's the magnet for this fight. He's a puppet of Iran, and no Arab force is going to fight ISIL unless we take Assad down, because you'd be giving Syria to the Iranians, their mortal enemy. So to Assad, when I say you will go, you will go. The sad fact is that Obama's going to leave before Assad. If I draw a red line, people will not cross it. If they do, they will pay a heavy price. I will be judicious in drawing that line, but I will be determined in enforcing it, because the alternative is chaos and another attack on our country that can be prevented and must be prevented. As to Iran, the ISIL threat is real. Al-Qaeda threats abound throughout the world. I've never seen more terrorist organizations with more safe haven, with more money, more equipment, more weapons to attack our homeland than I do today. We're reducing our intelligence capability where Mike was a leader. The budget cuts not only hurt our military, it hurts the FBI, it hurts the CIA and the DIA and all these other alphabet agencies that defend us by gathering intelligence and picking up the attack before it's too late. So if we don't repair our budget, we can't defend ourselves. As to Iran, of all the things that you could do wrong, we have done it. This is the biggest mistake of the ages. This is in the same category as believing that you could get a deal with Hitler. This is a peace in our time on steroids. This is incredibly naive and tremendously dangerous. I've been on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel and every opposition leader, and they all are very worried, and they should be. The idea you got to take a bad deal or have a war comes from a weak-minded president. Those are not your choices, folks. They should never be your choices. I've got to give them everything they want and then some, or we'll have a war, and I'm afraid of the two choices. The choice should be a good deal or no deal. And let Iran choose a war, not us. Here's what I'd tell the Ayatollah if I were President of the United States. You're not going to get a dime of sanctions relief until you stop destabilizing the region. They have toppled 4 Arab capitals under sanctions. Who are you dealing with? These people are religious fanatics. The Iranian people are good, cultured people. They went to the streets in 2009 demanding relief from this oppressive religious theocracy. They were shot down like dogs, and our president sat on the sidelines. Huge mistake. And we're paying a price for that mistake today. So what I would do is I would not honor this deal. I would not agree to give them one dime of money until they change their behavior. I would not allow them to buy one bullet until they change their behavior. I would dismantle their nuclear program, which was the original goal. If they wanted a peaceful nuclear power program for power production purposes, I would find a way to give it to them, because I do not object to peaceful nuclear power. I do object to large enrichment programs in the hands of religious fanatics. This deal on the nuclear side, after the passage of time, allows them to do whatever they would like. It does not dismantle their program. It locks in place an industrial-sized enrichment program with no limitations by the mere passage of time. What does that mean? It means the Arabs, the mortal enemy of the Persians, the Shias, the Iranians, will feel the need to counter this nuclear threat by getting a bomb of their own, because here's what we're telling the Arabs. Your mortal enemy has more money to wreak havoc on you and your neighbors. They're going to buy more weapons. They'll be more effective in the fight that you're engaged in now. And oh, by the way, over the passage of time, they're going to have a nuclear capability. And here's what the Arabs are going to say. We better get started. And if that's not enough, this deal allows them, after the passage of 8 years, to redesign their ICBM program so they could actually deliver the weapon. That wasn't even on the table. Is this a bad deal? It's a terrible deal. Any technology the Iranians develop, I fear, will come here. Any weapon you give them will go into the hands of a terrorist who will come here. Any money you provide the Ayatollah will not go into bridges or roads or schoolhouses. It will go into a war machine that threatens our way of life. As to our friends in Israel, if I'm President of the United States, you'll finally get a good night's sleep. I will have your back. There will not be words. The question for the world is, when they chant death to America, do they mean it? I think the Ayatollah does. And what he's chanting death to is the ability to worship God on your terms, not his. The ability to pick your leaders, to criticize those leaders, to chart your own way of life. He wants to destroy that because that runs against his way of doing business and his religious philosophy. When they chant death to America, they don't say death to Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Vegetarians, to us all, to our way of life. When they chant death to Israel, that's part of their religious teachings, is to bring about that death. This is the biggest miscalculation in world history since Adolf Hitler in the 30s. Those in Israel believe that the Ayatollah over time would use the weapon. They can't bet otherwise. This is the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, where the contest was to stop a master race who wanted to destroy the Jewish people. 6 million men, women, and children were killed simply because they were Jewish. There's one and only Jewish state in the world that's at risk. As President of the United States, I will deal with Iran firmly. If they want a war, it will be their choosing, not mine. I will tell them what will happen if they try to break out and get a nuclear weapon. If they do, the military option will be on the table if I'm president. And I promise you this, if they choose war, they will lose it.
Well, thank you, Senator Graham.
Long letter to follow.
And as I mentioned, now we've got time for some questions with Senator Graham, and I'll kick things off while everybody's thinking of theirs. The shift to a different region of the world, China. Here in Iowa, in the Midwest, our governor has a very unique relationship with President
Sell
Xi.
Chinese a lot of hogs.
We do, and they want to buy a lot of our egg commodities. We've got manufacturers that want to sell them our egg equipment, heavy construction equipment. So for most of Iowa, the relationship with Chinese has been largely blue sky when it comes to trade and the economy. So when you take a look at some of the activities we're seeing from China, not just in the South China Sea, industrial espionage, some of our agri-sciences companies here in the Midwest, and then the building out of their Navy, how would you balance the economic interests of a place like Iowa against the national security interest that the broader country has relative to Chinese aggression?
What I would do is I would tell the Chinese that the world has to be a place of order, not chaos. I would say if you got a dispute with your neighbor, let's settle it in court. Don't build an island over top of resource-rich waters other people claim and put a military battalion on top of it. That is not a way to run the world. So I would tell the Chinese, I'd like to trade with you. I'd like to be friendly with you. I think it could be a win-win, but I will not tolerate you intimidating your neighbors and destroying the concept of international law. They're doing this because they think they can. It's a communist dictatorship. To my good friends in Iowa, you go live in China and see how it would be for a while. You go to China and start chatting on the internet and see what happens to you. Come to a town hall meeting. You won't have any to go to, by the way. So the Chinese government is a communist dictatorship. If you don't understand that, you're making a mistake. But the world is the world. I will deal with China. I'll make it constructive. I will make sure you can sell anything and everything to China, but not at all cost. I will not turn American foreign policy into the quickest way to make a buck. I will be a voice for those things that we hold near and dear. I will stand up for our friends, and I reject totalitarianism where I find it. I will push back against intimidation and the breach of international law, because if we don't, we'll pay a heavy price. We need 14 aircraft carriers, not 11. How do you pivot to Asia under sequestration? And how do you have a military if you don't deal with the long-term debt generated by the retirement of the baby boomers? If you don't do something like Simpson Bowles, you will neither have security or prosperity. We're becoming Greece. To our friends in China, if you continue to be provocative and you continue to intimidate your neighbors and cyber attack us and steal our intellectual property, you will pay a price. You will not be allowed to do business with America in the same fashion. We're doing nothing in response to aggression by China when it comes to cyber theft and cyber attacks. They're filling their oats, and we need to push back. To people in Iowa, I will try to create a good relationship with China, but they have to change their behavior for that relationship to stay the same. If America doesn't push back against China, who will? It may hurt us in the short term, but will help us in the long term.
Yeah, Senator, if I may follow up on that relative to cyber. We know if a missile is launched that hits the northwest coast of the United States, I think we have a sense of what the appropriate response to be from a military perspective. But now that we have nation-state actors engaging in economically destructive warfare against private corporations, now we've got over 20 million federal employees, including some of the most sensitive intelligence positions that our government has been hacked, likely by a nation-state actor. You certainly would know more than I. How do you approach those decisions with what is a proportionate response to the new warfare we find ourselves in?
What are the rules of engagement? When does a cyber attack become an economic theft in the National Security Act? What are the rules of engagement? When is it you're stealing somebody's property versus attacking our critical infrastructure? Here's the thing I would suggest. They'll stop doing it if the price is greater than the benefit. They're not crazy. They're getting the benefit of stealing our intellectual property rather than developing it on their own. Terrorist groups all over the world are hacking into our systems to make us weaker. If you ask me what I fear the most other than nuclear armed it's a Pearl Harbor cyber attack. But the difference between our capabilities and those of our antagonists in the cyber arena is very small. Conventional military, we're in good shape. As President of the United States, I would replace sequestration to build up our ability to defend us from a cyber attack. The critical infrastructure in the private sector has to be hardened, but I would allow the private sector to do it in the best business-friendly fashion. I would give liability protections for companies that will harden their critical infrastructure in the air, power, and financial services. So if you do the right thing and you get attacked, you'll never get sued. I would put tax credits on the table to incentivize people in the private sector to harden their critical infrastructure. We're no stronger than the weakest contractor in the Department of Defense in terms of our systems. I would make this an all-out effort, a sort of a Marshall Plan to harden our infrastructure. I would tell our adversaries, please stop this. Because if you don't, you're not going to have the same economic relationship you enjoy today, and we will push back. We're exposed in a cyber attack way too great.
Yeah, Paul.
Senator, thank you for coming to Cedar Rapids. I appreciate it. I also would like to say, as an Iraqi veteran, that I appreciate your comments on Iraq very much. And I can tell you, I can't possibly speak for every Iraqi veteran, but I can tell you that everyone I know wants to go back. So please send us back when you become president. But my question, I guess, and you and Chairman Strawn referenced it, there's a pivot, supposedly a pivot security-wise to Asia, and then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs comes before Congress and says, well, our major threat is Russia. And so I guess, given all of that, do people ignoring the Middle East now? I mean, do they not understand what's happening in Syria and Iraq as you do?
No, people understand. You know what we need to pivot from? Being weak to strong, from being a reliable friend and a better adversary. We need to pivot from leading from behind to leading the free world, for speaking up for the right thing and not tolerating evil without comment. We need to be less transactional and more visionary. We need to be America at her best at a time when the world needs us the most. It's not a region that we've got a problem with. It's a concept of where we're no longer respected. When the American president speaks, nobody much cares anymore. When I speak, people will listen. I don't want a war. I don't want to send you or anybody else to Iraq, but we've got to go. Now, I don't want you to stay any longer than you have to, but you're going to stay as long as it's necessary. We're about to pull all of our troops out of Afghanistan. If I'm president, we're going to leave 10,000 behind as long as it takes to secure Afghanistan. It will be a conditions-based withdrawal. The pivot that I'm looking for, sir, is a pivot in leadership, in vision, in capability, and will. As to Russia, they're playing with a pair of tubes. Imagine Putin without gas. What would he be? What would you think about that? Power president, we would extract as much natural gas as we could in an environmentally sound way, and we'd sell it to our European allies, so he wouldn't have a monopoly over Europe. We'd undercut the monopoly he possesses. If I were president, we would arm the Ukrainian defense forces with defensive weapons, so the Russians and their allies would pay a heavier price to try to dismember the Ukraine. If I were president, we'd have a meeting very early on of NATO nations, and I would tell them we're about to increase our defense spending, and so shall you. NATO is no stronger than the American president. 5 nations of the 26 spend 2% of GDP on defense. It's becoming a hollow force. I would reinforce NATO, and wherever Putin loved, he would see a NATO flag. When we signed an agreement with the Ukrainians that if you'll give up your 2,400 nuclear weapons, we'll guarantee your sovereignty. They did. Who would do that in the future? International law has been stepped on in the Ukraine by the Russians. They're paying no price. So at the end of the day, the pivot that I'm looking for is not a place, but a concept. From behind, leading from behind and leading in front. From having capability and capacity we don't possess today. And having a determined will. All I can tell the American people, if I could do all of these things without asking for sacrifice, I would. I want a good relationship with China, but somebody has to stand up to them before they take market share away from us in Asia by simply intimidating our trading partners. You can't allow a country to take resources from others because they can. You can't allow agreements you sign to mean nothing, because over time you'll have chaos. There is no substitute in the world today for a strong America with a clear vision of who she is and the role she plays. That has burdens of its own, unique to us. For whatever reason, God has endowed us and blessed us with the ability to lead the free world. I accept that burden. I think it is in our national security interests and long-term peace and prosperity to accept the challenge.
You reminded me of some things like the Naked Communist book, 20 Ways to Take Over a Country from Within. If you want to comment on that, and you also reminded me of the electromagnetic pulse weapon and the giant solar flare that's long overdue, and our electrical grid is vulnerable to all this. Plus, what are you going to do with the infrastructure? But the real thing I want to get to is you were talking a more deeper perspective. You were talking about the behavior of our enemies. Well, I would like to present possibly where this is coming from. And this comes from a man that has 17 PhDs. He has half the Bible memorized, and now he's reading the Quran along with all the other books he reads. And he says in the Quran, there are 273 surahs, or verses that talk about killing, 109 about jihad, and 164 about all the other ways they have the right to kill us, and the ways they should do that, which includes beheading, and why they have the right to do it. We don't accept Allah. You're the people of the book.
So what's your question?
So the question is, since the Muslim young men sit for 8 hours with the Quran in their lap, rocking back and forth, memorizing this, are we going to be like Tunisia, who is closing possibly 80 mosques? Are we going to do something where this is coming from, and that is their school system and the way they propagandize, because the Israeli children and the Jewish children play together before they go to school?
Yeah.
Are we going to go to the source, or are we going to be fighting this forever?
Okay, this is a good question. How do you degrade and destroy radical Islam within the faith by the people of the faith who do not want their daughters to be turned over to ISIL, which is most people? The good thing about going to the Mideast so often is you actually understand people and you get to interact with them. Here's the way we win this war. We provide capacity where there is will to fight back against radical Islam. If you tell me that all Muslims buy into this, you don't know what you're talking about. I have been with people in Afghanistan and Iraq who've had their family members killed as judges, as lawyers, as police officials, to be replaced by another family member. The will to fight back against this radical Islamic philosophy and teaching is strong. It is just under-resourced. It's a generational struggle. Dropping a bomb from an F-16 turns the tide of battle. What wins the war is educating a young girl in a remote region, giving her an education so she can have a voice for her children. If we had not stayed in Germany and Japan, only God knows what would have happened to the next generation. So I will end with this thought. There's two things going on in front of us. A fight for the heart and soul of Islam between a minority and a majority as to how that religion would interact with the world. I will stand with people in the faith who would live in peace with me, and they're the vast majority, and I've met them, and I know that to be true. As to the radicals, I will do everything I can to empower the others to destroy you. You never destroy radical thought, but you can put it in a box. The KKK wears a cross. Does that represent my religion? No. They co-opted the cross. Well, radical Islam has co-opted Islam. And I stand ready to fight back and help those in the faith who will do most of the fighting. Young people in the Mideast are very much like Iowa. They want something better than they have today. To ask a young person to live in a totalitarian dictatorship for our convenience, those days are over because they've seen what life could be like. So, to my Republican colleagues who wish for Saddam to come back, that Gaddafi were still alive, you have no idea what you're saying. Would you live in a society where your daughter could be taken at will by the henchmen of the regime? I sure wouldn't. Would you live in a society where your fate's determined on the day you're born without pushing back? I wouldn't. So the Arab Spring is real. It has been co-opted. It has been overtaken by radical Islam. But it still exists, folks. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to side with the young people, the women, the disenfranchised of the Mideast, who want to reject radical Islam and Saddam Hussein. They want to reject radical Islam and the Ayatollah. This war will not end on my watch as president, but the beginning of victory will start with me. The march toward victory is inevitable. All of these radical ideologies are eventually defeated like the Nazis. The only question is how many of us must die before we get there. How many underestimations will we make as a people? As for me, I have figured this out, at least in my own mind. We're in a religious war, and I'm going to side with people we can live with to extinguish this hate. We're in a transformational age in the Mideast, and I'm going to side with the young. As to how you know you won, I will give you my definition of victory. There will come a day, and I hope you and I live to see it, where radical ideology will be rejected by the population as a whole, where the police force and the army will take care of the people, not just the dictator, where that the imams and the politicians will look down on the radical Islamists the way we look down on the KKK. There will be a marginal force of people in the region, and peace and prosperity will abound. The ability to trade and interact will exist. There will be conservative Islam, but not radical Islam. There will be a time, not in the too distant future, I pray, where a woman can have a say about her children's future. When that day comes, we'll have won this war. As to the Arabs, I will work with you to go into Syria, but I ask you two things. Stop funding terrorism. Close these madrasas down. let women drive. We have to do two things at once. Push against radical Islam and empower those in the region who would fight it and live in peace with us. We have to get the region to change. Change comes slowly, but it will never come without leadership. And here's what I predict. When I left Germany in 1988, I never dreamed I would see the Berlin Wall fall. But I knew when I was there from 84 to 88 that Ronald Reagan was doing everything he could to bring that wall down. I will do everything I can to bring radical Islam down and replace it with something we all can live with. God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Senator, can't thank you enough for your willingness to engage on these issues that are critical to Iowans. And I think Iowans. I think you've demonstrated why we get the very unique privilege to be entrusted with the caucus process. And Senator, Godspeed.
Thank you. I'll be back. Never lose the caucus. If it weren't for the caucus, I wouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell. This is the best way to pick a president, not a pollster, but the Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire and South Carolina, where you have to go to the Perkins in the morning, you go to somebody's house at night and visit a pig farm. That is the best way to pick a president. Get to know these people. Polling is about celebrity and name ID. The Iowa caucuses is about competency and character. Fight for your caucus.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to Senate back.
I'll see you at Perkins. Or on the pig farm.
Senator, can you answer a question?
Sure.